There are a few things that I'd like to say and do before I offer the sermon. You've noticed we have balloons here, bright, colorful balloons. Now, you all know I'm such a serious person. It couldn't possibly be for me, so I expect it's because it's Peter's birthday today.
Thank you, Reverend Ann.
Come on up. Ben, come on up. Roshini, come on up. Stand up on the stairs. Stand up on the stairs. Nice and
Tall.
up. Way up. Yeah. Nice. That's it. There you go. All right.
Now, this bright green t-shirt says animation on it. Shortly after I came, we put together a kids group called Animation. Peter Jones was happened to be the director. Andy Neal was the choreographer. And they were quite something. And we got together with the Thomas Queen Public Library and the National Park Service, and we put on a day over at the Adams National Historical Park about the Amistad, because the Mendy Bible that was given to John Quincy Adams is there. And Animation performed, and the choreography was splendid. They even did backflips over at the Adams Mansion. So I remember that day very well. Then we have a blue and white t-shirt. I belong to Quincy Point Congregational Church. Those were the shirts for one of our children's summer programs. Allison Greer was here then. And what I remember about that was we went into Symphony Hall all together, and Allison and the children stood on the stage at Boston Symphony Hall and sang. I'll always remember that. Then we have the Right Whale shirt. At one point, we sponsored a right whale to try to keep them safe through the aquarium in Boston. And we were the first group to make a donation toward them, the new facility right here in Quincy, where injured animals, turtles, are brought for rehabilitation. The black and white shirt was one from of our musical extravaganzas. It was a cabaret, and we did that to raise money for Father Bills. Now we have here the Quincy Pointers t-shirt, and they make my heart glad. It's our own band with our teenagers, and they had their own shirts, and I think they've all outgrown them. And we do have, I found a large and an extra large left over, so that if you started out with a small or medium and you'd like a big one, up there in the balcony, give these a try. We had our big maritime festival, Making Waves in Quincy Point, where we celebrated all of those who made ships at the shipyard, those who sailed on them. If you remember, we had a bigger than life-size puppet of St. Brendan, and we marched down Washington Street, and people came out of businesses to join us, and the scouts and tourists were taking pictures of us, even though they didn't know what we were doing. We had a t-shirt made by our confirmation class this year. And it was socks for the soul, and it was a sock drive for folks at Father Bill's and Main Spring House. And their goal was 500 pairs of socks and they gathered over 750 pairs of socks. I will always remember that. My last T-shirt, thank you, put them down. Thank you so much for showing me. Hi, Mom. Do you have a train? We always had a theme for Rally Day in the fall, and one year we had a Red Sox theme. And I did not make this T-shirt. Somebody gave me this shirt. This was the year, the year was sad year, that Johnny Damon defected. And it says, and I would not make this, it was given to me. There's a picture of Johnny Damon and why on it. But it says, oh, it says Johnny Demon. Looks like Jesus. Acts like Judas. And flows like Mary. I do not know any other clergy person who actually has a Boston Red Sox stole. Cedar Rebel, the Bethany Church, is with us today. He has a Boston Red Sox stole. And I think that since this was given to me, I'm going to pass it on to him. We need to keep it. Pass it on to someone. Now, I thought that since I'm making the transition from there to here, next year I'll be sitting in the pew, that I'd start the sermon down here today. It is June, it's graduation time, people making transitions, and I thought about when I made the transition from high school to college, in my school life, took my tests and I wrote my papers and I did very well and I enjoyed myself, but when I went to college, I was kind of in shock because everybody was so brilliant. I felt everybody was smarter than I was. So I signed up for a class in Greek philosophy my first semester, first year, and I ended up the only freshman in a class of senior philosophy majors. And I was overwhelmed. And I signed up for the biology 101 class. I didn't take biology in high school. I enjoyed it. So I thought, well, that's fine. I can do okay. And I was surrounded by 100 aggressive, competitive, pre-med majors who all wanted to be number one in that class. And I was overwhelmed again. And I signed up for astronomy. What a beautiful thing, gaze at the stars. And then I looked at books and mostly all physics. And I was curious because there weren't many kids in the class. And I found out that anybody with any brains waited until spring to take the class because there were two things you had to do. You had to sit on the roof of the science building and 10 degree weather. And then in the building with the huge telescope, of course, the temperature in the room has to be the same temperature outside. And I felt pretty foolish for picking out that class. But then I was quite discouraged the first semester. I didn't know how it was going to last. And I had to do something to get my determination going, give me some hope. And so I even though I was a freshman, I usually don't buy a class ready until you're a senior, you know, where you're a senior. I still have it. I bought my class training. As if to say to myself, Anna Susan out, you have this training, you already bought it, you aren't going to wear it 4 years from now when you graduate. Because I really needed some motivation. And then I looked at it, and in tiny, tiny print is the college motto. In Latin it says, non ministrari, sed ministrara, which is not to be ministered unto, but to minister. In other words, not to be served, but to serve. And I was smart enough second semester, I discovered the Religion and Biblical Studies department. And I felt like I had come home. I belonged there. And I knew that I was meant to be a servant of God, a servant of God's people. Jesus himself said that he came not to be served, but to serve. And that does not mean that Jesus was a doormat. Far from it. When Jesus teaches in the scriptures, you see that people say, they are amazed, and they say he teaches as one who has authority. And then we see that even the soldiers of the Roman Empire come and kneel before him and ask him to heal their loved ones. And when he's out at sea in the boat with the disciples, this Jesus is able to still the winds, to calm the storm. He was a fearless advocate for those who had been treated with contempt or disdain, for any who had been pushed aside. The powers that be were so threatened by this servant Jesus that they tried to stop him and discredit him, and finally they decided they had to destroy him. But they failed, and Jesus was ultimately victorious. His love was stronger than anything, even the powers of death. His love is eternal. Jesus, my friends, was no doormat. As a servant leader, Jesus doesn't coerce, he inspires. He teaches us that love and service in God's realm involve sacrifice. It's the humble servant Christ who dignifies our own hardships and sufferings that has drawn many of us into the church. It's the servant Christ who understands the hardships in our lives, who makes room for us here, who calls us to be here. When I first came, I shared a passage by the famous educator Robert Coles. He had a book called The Spiritual Life of Children. The author interviews Margarita, and Margarita is a child from the slums in Rio, in Brazil. And she says, when I look up at Jesus there, and she points to that famous statue in Rio of Jesus up on the mountain looking out to sea. When I look up at Jesus, I wonder what he's thinking, this child says. He can see all of us. He must have an opinion. I try to talk to him. He's all that I have. I'm either upset with him or I'm praying to him to tell me why the world is like it is. I look up at him and I say, "What do you say, Jesus?" Margarita looks up at that stone statue, that cold image overlooking such misery, and she says, my little sister, she's always crying because she doesn't have enough to eat. I hope Jesus sees everything that goes on here," she says. I hope he just doesn't stare into the ocean like that statue. Margarita, Jesus isn't at the top of the Copacabana staring out into the ocean, impervious to the misery below. He's out among the people, trying to teach us about serving others, trying to teach us a love which is so great it's willing to make sacrifices. Jesus isn't at the top of the Copacabana. He's out among the people, standing up for those in greatest need and never giving up. He came among us stooped to our weakness, took on the role of servant. And Jesus is out there on that road to Emmaus when all hope seemed gone, surprising the world with the great news of resurrection, the power of God's victory, with the hope of God's promises and the miracle of God's love. Now, we are all called to be servants in the strong name of Jesus. I'm still going to be a servant of God, but I will be among you, not standing up here, having to fight over how tall the pulpit is that morning, so that, because when Peter's preaching, the pulpit comes to here on me. Before I finish, I want to tell you how I feel about serving this church. This church of generous, warm-hearted, compassionate people. You're creative, you're faithful. Since our service is broadcast on Quincy Cable TV, I figured this is the place to do it so everybody will know how I feel about you, everybody in Quincy at least. Somebody who watches the broadcast regularly asks me why I'm always smiling. I smile because I love being the pastor of Quincy Point Congregational Church. I smile because I love all of you. And I smile because I am very thankful to have been pastor of this place. You inspire me. You have consoled me. You make my heart glad. Kleenex phone. Won't you let me be your servant? Let me be as Christ in you. Pray that my happy days, let you be my servant too. We are pilgrims on a journey for travelers on the road. We are here to help each other, open arms, and share the load. I will weep when you are weeping, and when you laugh, I will laugh with you. I will share your joy and sorrow till we see this journey through. I am grateful and I love you. Amen.